Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Bogueva from Curtin University, Australia. I'm delighted to be part of this conference. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to talk about demand for animal-based food products and sustainability. The animal-based food products, and especially meat, has its special place in our human diets. Our relationship with meat is deeply rooted and undoubtedly important for us humans. And the love we have for it is shown in its constantly increasing demand. As you can see from the graph, the global demand for animal-based food products is growing exponentially across the world, with many people actually consciously consuming a protein-rich diet. This is not only in the Western countries, but now also in the developing world. Over the past 50 years, meat production has more than quadrupled. The world now produces more than 350 million tons each year to satisfy the demand for meat, which is more than 4 times the quantity of meat produced 50 years ago. It is a demand driven simply because of our food system reliance on animals to feed people. And we want more and more of these animals to satisfy our appetite. The love for meat is profoundly embedded in our diets. Meat has important social, cultural, as well as nutritional functions. It is a function of eating habits, of social identity, of the history of personal relationships related to establish cultural and societal perceptions, and a function of misinformation and manipulation, I'll say, from the advertising and food-linked industries of our personal choices. This manipulation from the advertising industry is so pervasive and persuasive, and shape consumers' values, behaviors, and self-esteem, and help also enhance traits like masculinity, virility, human hegemony, and power. In many societies, the consumption and the provision of certain types of meat signals status, luxury, in some places hospitality. All of these meat functions are normalizing animals as our best food choices and our food sources, best food sources as well. As you can see from the meat supply per person, meat consumption reaches unprecedented levels of unsustainability. As a global average, per capita meat consumption has increased approximately 20 kilograms since 1961. Now the developing nations and the growing world population are demanding more animal proteins, and the developing countries with strong economic transitions like China are demanding for more animal proteins. Per capita consumption in China has grown approximately 15-fold since 1961. Rates in Brazil have nearly quadrupled. The major exception of this pattern is only India. The country, despite rapidly catching up with China in terms of population, is still consuming a very tiny fraction of the world's meat. India's per capita meat consumption is almost exactly the same as it was in 1961, at less than 4 kilograms per person. Meat consumption is still the highest across high-income countries like Australia, the United States, Brazil, and this is ranges around 110 plus kilograms for Australia, the United States, and 80 kilograms for the European countries and other parts of the world. Consumption trends across Africa are also varied. Around half of the continental average is as low as 10 kilograms per person, but higher income African nation such as South Africa consume between 60-70 kilograms per person. And there is also progressive correlation between our meat eating and our income. Meat consumption tends to rise high as we get richer. Eating meat is the strongest determinant around the globe of how rich we are. You can see the highest, richest nations. Eating meat is actually in good relationship with the GDP. The richer a country is, the more meat the average person typically eats. And now we can look at the global land use for food production. We need efficient and sustainable food production. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, 1 in 9 humans do not have access to enough food, and they are undernourished. There are almost 821 million people in the world. Hunger is increasing in many countries where economic growth is lagging. But on the other hand, other 650 million people are obese. The worldwide prevalence of obesity nearly tripled between 1975 and 1918. Globally, obesity has reached epidemic proportions with at least 2.8 million people dying each year as a result of being overweight or obese. But today, the growing consumption of meat protein actually contradicts the Earth's ability to sustainably feed its population. The production of meat has a large environmental impact, increasing greenhouse gas emissions, agricultural land, and freshwater use. 29% of the world's entire ice-free surface, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, are occupied from livestock, making animal agriculture a world leader in global deforestation and biodiversity loss. Half of the habitable land is used for agriculture. Livestock account for 77% of global farming land, while livestock takes up most of the world agricultural land. It is only a producer of 18% of the world calories and 37% of total proteins. Approximately 15% of the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions come from livestock production, about 3% due to the dairy production, of which 40% are due to beef and dairy farming. It is now recognized that the Western world animal product heavy diet is unsustainable for both our environment and health, feeding 10 billion mouths by mid-century using livestock and simultaneously safeguarding the climate, natural habitats, and human well-being will be categorically impossible if not dietary changes are adopted. But we have unsustainable trends around that are very concerning: more meat per capita, more meat per animal. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates there are currently around 19 billion chickens, 1.5 billion cattle, 1 billion sheep, and 1 billion pigs that are used as livestock. According to the Economist, the number is 3 times higher than the number of people living. But those figures are overshadowed by the number of animals we eat, simply because we eat more meat per person than ever before. In the last 50 years, the numbers of people on the planet has doubled, but the amount of meat we eat has tripled. As you can see for this graph, how many animals do we eat each year? Globally, 18 billion animals are slaughtered each year for meat. The vast majority of these animals are raised in places in overcrowded conditions that are becoming a breeding grounds for diseases and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. An enormous amount of food is wasted in fattening these animals. 1/3 of the world entirely cereal harvest can push up the cost for grains in countries where it is a key point of sustenance for people living in poverty. And the overconsumption of animal-based food, according to the health authorities like the World Health Organization, is linked to heart diseases, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers, and as well as other public health crises like antimicrobial resistance and food contamination. Countries like mine, Australia, where meat consumption is more than 100 kilograms per capita a year, has much to answer for promoting such high levels of meat consumption. And bear in mind that not every single person in the Australian population is consuming meat. But with consumption rising significantly across part of the world, especially Asia and particularly China, animal-based food demands figures are already looking hugely concerning. Among them, an estimated 50 billion chickens slaughtered for food every year. A figure that excludes male chicks and unproductive hens killed in egg production. The number of larger livestock, particularly slaughtered pigs, is also growing, as you can see from the charts. Nearly 1.5 billion pigs are killed to fit the growing appetite for pork, bacon, hams, and sausages, a number that has tripled in the last 50 years. 500 million sheep are taken to the abattoir every year. The number of goats slaughtered overtook the number of cows eaten during 1990s, although the figure for cattle excludes the dairy industry. In contrast, with pork and chicken, the most popular red meat, beef, has been its global share nearly half in the last 50 years to 22%, but is still remaining nearly 5 times more popular than lamb, and still is holding leading consumption quantities. More meat per capita per animal, another disturbing trend. Livestock are heavier than ever. We are producing more meat with less livestock. We are quickly fattening animals with 3 main contributing factors: breeding, improving health quality, and drug use. The use of drugs to enhance the livestock growth rates, including hormones, steroids, antibiotics, are raising concerns and protests worldwide. Consumers fear that drug residues in meat are leading to side effects ranging from sterility to obesity and cancer. So what can be done? I will answer this in a minute, but before this, I would like to look at the global protein landscape. Demand for protein for human consumption is on the rise, and it is likely to continue to grow quickly in the future. But the drivers for these demands will potentially be different from the past. Global protein consumption has risen 40% since 2000, with over half of the increase driven by Asia. According to Food Innovation Australia Limited, FIAO, globally, people today are estimated to consume about 26 kilograms of protein per year on average. Going forward, the rising affluence of the readily and rapidly expanding consuming class is likely to drive another surge in protein demand, with global per capita consumption to rise by 27% to 33 kilograms in 2025. Indonesia and sub-Saharan Africa are forecasted to see the higher protein demand growth rate of up to 3.6% per year between 2018 and 2025. On the protein supply side, the structure of global protein supply will evolve with slowing growth rate in meat supply expected to be offset by increasing plant-based protein in aquaculture production, global plant-based protein consumption supply is likely to remain as the dominant source of supply in 2025. In value terms, the global protein market could be worth up to 513 billion Australian dollars in 2025, 40% of which could come from meat proteins. At the regional level, Australia will be the biggest market across all protein categories in 2025. The country alone could account for 35% of global protein market value, with the exception of plant-based protein. By 2050, global food system will need to meet the dietary demand of more than 10 billion people, who on average will be wealthier than people today and will aspire to the type of food choices currently available only in high-income countries. It will be impossible for a global population of 10 billion people to eat the amount of meat typical of diets in Australia, North America, and Europe, and keep up within the agreed sustainable development goals for the environmental and climate. It will require too much land and water and will lead to unacceptable greenhouse gas and other pollutant emissions. In addition, excess meat consumption and current production have significant effect on human health, livelihood of the economy. Meat possess a special challenge to the future development of the global food system. So what can be done? Feeding 10 billion mouths by mid-centuries using livestock and simultaneously safeguarding the climate natural habitats, I'm repeating this, and human well-being will be categorically impossible if not any dietary changes are pursued. Curbing emission from agriculture and especially from livestock production is essential to fulfilling the Paris Agreement and shifting to a different diet, including eat-lasting planetary health diet, the flexitarian diet, and other transparently produced and ethically based dietary choices. Consuming a modest or lower amount of meat is viewed as one of the ways toward achieving sustainability. An increased focus on plant-based foods and other meat alternatives present a strong potential for reducing agriculture-induced emissions and transitioning toward a more plant-based agricultural sector. This also underlines the need for worldwide national policies incentivizing the plant-based transitions. And the trend is evident with the growing number of flexitarians and vegetarian consumer segments worldwide. In Australia, one of the highest meat consuming nations in the world, that this trend, even slowly growing, is also visible. The number of vegetarians has risen with approximately 4% in the last 3 years, from 9% to almost 13%. What are the solutions? Plant-based proteins, insect-based and cellular agriculture, beef and milk without the cow, and eggs without the hen are the solutions. These alternatives are well placed to fill predicted shortfall in meat production in the coming years. Alternatives to animal proteins, advances in food science, ingredients characterization, food engineering and processing and production have resulted in a wave of new alternatives to animal proteins as we know it. This is including plant-based meat products, burgers, sausages, mincemeat, chicken, all designed to replicate the sensory appearance, texture, and visual appearance of the traditional meat. Other variations are cultured meat, insect-based, and algae-based food, all intended for human consumption. The idea of being alternatives to animal proteins behind alternative sustainable proteins is providing consumers with alternatives that are tasty, nutritious, familiar, and have a lighter environmental impact. Many you can see are creating burgers, meatballs, and fillets. There are plenty of varieties. You can see sausages, plant-based. You can see mince. You can see chicken, not this chicken, that chicken, plant-based chicken. So also plant-based milk. Interest in plant-based alternatives is booming and gaining considerable momentum. And I will not be surprised if this emerging food category find its way from a niche to the mainstream markets. These products are designed to mimic animal meat's characteristic as a sensory and functional level, to taste, smells, and bleed like a fresh meat. These particular segments of the plant-based meat industry are already defining meat as a product defined by its complex molecular structures and composition rather than its animal origin. Many producers like the Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, Tofurco, and in the United States, Nestle in the Switzerland, Linda McCartney and Quorn in the UK, Lam Yong Farm Foods, V2, and the Alternative Meat Co. in Australia are producing all of these plant-based alternatives. These new plant-based products appeal to a range of consumers, the new flexitarian consumers or meat reducers who are generating considerable market growth for plant-based meat consistently with health, the environmental and animal welfare, and most importantly, these are actually big reasons for reducing meat consumption. Numerous publicized studies from health authorities, including the World Health Organization, Eat Lancet Commission, and other, recommend eating less meat for better health and to combat chronic diseases. It appears many Western countries' consumers, including those from Australia, New Zealand, Germany, are getting the message. Health is the number one reasons they choose to eat less meat, closely followed by the environment, animal welfare cost, and increasing variety of plant-based options available. This is actually a research, another research referring to the answer of some of the participants in the Common Barton research in Australia and New Zealand. Meat eaters who aren't currently reducing their intake selected reduces my chances of getting cancer, reduces my chances of having a stroke, and improves my overall health as factors most likely to motivate them to eat less meat. Currently in Australia, there are 136 plant-based products on the market from all around the world, and consumers have the opportunity to experience this greater availability and variety of plant-based alternatives. But what consumer wants? Consumer wants sustainable products, sustainably produced with low environmental footprint. If we have to assess the sustainability advantages of meat-based, say, burger, we need to look at the water, land use, and greenhouse gas emissions and the energy. The research done by Hela and Keo Leon from the University of Michigan in 2018 looked at the Beyond Meat, Beyond Burger life cycle assessment, and particularly they made a detailed comparison between the plant-based and animal-based protein source. The comparison showed that, as you can see, the plant-based burger uses 99% less water, 93% less land, and produces 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions and 50% less energy use. According to Beyond Meat calculations, On average, Americans eat 3 burgers a week. If they switch just one of these burgers to a Beyond Burger or another plant-based burger for a year, it will be like taking away 12 million cars off the roads and saving enough energy to power 2.3 million homes. But what else consumer wants? Consumer wants transparency of ingredients and production. They need to know where the ingredients came from. Are they were genetically modified, exposed to special chemicals, manipulated of some sort, not to be too chemically processed and associated with engineering and modification. Consumer wants a product with awareness of health benefits. What are the health advantages of one product against another food products? Are these based on vitamins, minerals, extra nutrients, or other benefits? The increased awareness of health benefits is also due to the availability of information on the internet, the media, and also celebrity influences, which are also contributing to desire for dietary changes. Product with animal welfare consideration, whether the animal's welfare and dignities are met. Superior taste and quality products. The development of good plant-based food require an understanding of what makes a meat products taste the way they do. For example, the muscles of animals have a complex structure that is determined by their locomotion function. It is difficult to mimic this structure using plant-based sources. Consumer also wants variety of new flavor to impress the palate. Consumer are seeking more creativity, flexibility, and variety of their diets by mixing up traditional meat combination and experimenting with new flavors to impress their palate. The main discussion now must be on consumer acceptance. Consumer acceptance has been not so sufficiently investigated, looking into whether some familiarity with the concept of different types of meat alternatives will make consumers to be more enthusiastic about potential willingness to frequently consume and have a regular purchase of these new products is one of the things that we need to look around. And more alternatives to animal proteins are algae, insects, and cultured meats, which could be also part of our daily menu. I'll touch on algae first. The development of algae protein could be the next big things for vegan meat. There are a number of companies researching on the versatile plant-based ingredients, and algae actually is one of these prospects. Being an aquatic plant, algae does not compete with other plant agriculture crop resources, both in terms of land and freshwater requirements. They also release oxygen into the atmosphere. As they grow, scientists estimate around 50% of atmospheric oxygen is provided by algae. We know that research into the use of algae as a biofuel is well established, but its uses in vegan food innovations are relatively new area of research. The most advanced and leading the way with expertise in algae are the Northern European entrepreneurs, majority based in Netherlands, like the company Corbion. Their algae oil was successfully launched in 2018. And this is actually particularly interesting because this oil is quite attractive due to its plant-based omega-9 content. The nutritional benefits of algae and microalgae are already well known. Spirulina, which you may be using, contains 3 times the amount of usable protein as beef per 100 grams. 1 tablespoon of spirulina powder, an already common food supplements used by many consumers, and you may be also provides a healthy dose of calcium, iron, magnesium, and potassium, as well as B vitamins and vitamin A. Currently, most innovations focus on algae as an ingredient in other products, but there are recent developments in creating algae-based molecules that behave and taste comparable to meat. San Diego-based company is one of these companies that is developing research in this direction. This is Triton Algae Innovations, one of the companies making progress into this direction. The initial aim is not to make algae steak, not yet, but to be an ingredients provider for the future algae-based steaks. So maybe algae will be set to become the newest option for those searching for vegan alternatives to animal protein. And now I can touch on the insects. Within the non-traditional protein category, actually insects are the largest and fastest growing protein types. And the fact that there are more than 2,000 insect species, mostly collected from the nature, is remarkable. But the market, especially in the Western countries, remains small in absolute terms. The main insect groups are currently industry farms, insects for foods, which are cricket, mealworms, and grasshoppers. And the reason for this is consumer perception about insect as foods and their willingness to have insect as part of their regular food menu as not so kind of bright and promising. Why we should eat insect? They're healthy. Insects are a complete protein. They're a highly nutritious and healthy food source with high fat, protein, vitamin, fiber, and mineral contents. They're sustainable. Insects emit less greenhouse gases and ammonia than cattle or pigs, and require less land for rearing. Insects can also feed on organic byproducts such as human and animal waste, which may help reduce environmental contamination. They're delicious, enjoyed by many around the world, safe, traditional. Over 2.5 billion people worldwide enjoy insects as part of their diet regularly. Insects are also a potential solution to world hunger and food insecurity, and a stable income to farmers in developing countries. So a lot of potential from insects. And now I'm going to touch on the cultured meats. Almost 90 years ago, Winston Churchill seems predicted the creation of cultured meat. He wrote in 1932. 50 years hence, we shall escape the absurdity of growing whole chicken in order to eat the breast or wing by growing these two parts separately under a suitable medium. The idea actually was not Churchill's own idea, but the idea was 2 years earlier by the writer and conservative politician Frederick Edwin Smith, who has predicted it will no longer be necessary to go to the extravagant length of rearing a bullock in order to eat the steak. From one parent steak of choice, it will be possible to grow as large as and probably as juicy as steaks as we can be desired. We would think that almost 90 years later, the human should master the idea of growing cultured meat, but right now it is still in its infancy. Cultured meat or in vitro meat has its benefits. As Churchill and Edwin Smith predicted, cultured meat allows people to consume meat and to continue doing this with other benefits. It has environmental, animal welfare, and health advantages over traditional meats. It is produced from animal cells, stem cells of muscles, not the real animal. It uses 99% less space, and it is grown in a nutrient-rich culture medium as predicted by both Churchill and Edwin Smith, and also uses less water and resources, but this doesn't apply regarding to the energy that is used to produce it, as the constant electrical current is needed for the muscle to contract. So the future meat is built, but this also depends on the source of energy use, if it is from fossil fuel or renewable sources. There is definitely a perception of improved animal welfare in the production of cultured meat, where there is no animal suffering, there is no exploitation, no slaughter, no harming the animals. But there are other implications. In one of our recent studies with the Generation Z regarding their attitude towards cultured meat, they raised a very interesting concept. Although the just mentioned attitudes toward cultured meat, they raised the concept of meat production with thought of the welfare and dignity of the animal. So these were Generation Z, 18 to 25 years old, born 1995 and 2002. Actually, what they said, they found that the cell to be drawn from the live animal and then manipulated chemically to grow is unethical and painful for the cow. Another interesting nuance of the ethical use of animal for food production was the issue Generation Z has about animal dignity. They spoke about the permission of the cow to use its cells to produce food as being really unethical and painful. Very interesting concept indeed. And this kind of question actually will be often asked from the consumers. Consumers are changing. Understanding consumers' desires, consumers' trends towards the way they see alternative proteins and the industry implications is responding to the consumer demands, and is maybe likely to be changing in the next maybe 10 years and more. In conclusion, demand for animal-based food products will remain strong. But we need to bear in mind that humans can no longer afford to eat meat on a large scale like we are doing now. Livestock production imposes a vast burden on the global resources, and also we have in mind the expanding world population. And if we want to do something, we have to change. We need to embrace sustainable behaviors and diets. Sustainable diets with low environmental impacts, which by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization contributes to food and nutrition security, and to the healthy life for present and future generations, protective and respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems, culturally acceptable, accessible, economically fair and affordable, nutritionally adequate, health and safe and healthy, while optimizing natural and human resources. Ingrained cultural habits die hard and often lead to political headaches. The smoking controversy took 50 years, just for a reference, and initiated massive denial, lobbying, and science brokering by the tobacco industry. To reach the stage where regulations were put in place to require smokers to inhale out of doors and further away from public buildings. Sustainable food demands requires another big political headaches. And I hope there is awakening from consumers to continue to show with their changing demands the first step towards achieving more sustainability. Thank you very much for your time. This was my pleasure. Thank you.